I don't know if those words are familiar to you, but increasing the ability for both people and businesses to participate in the now digital payments. And so financial inclusion is a very natural extension of that. As we build out the digital payment systems all around the world, in any country, we've helped bring people and create opportunity for people and businesses. That's even more so in the countries, mostly developing countries, that are mostly cash, right? There are it's many countries, less so in China, much more so in Africa. They function entirely in cash. So as we build the system, we bring people in. I joined Visa as part of a team rooted in the business to help the company move towards financial inclusion even faster. Right? We knew we were doing quite a lot, but we said we want to be more purposeful. We want to create both the accounts, but also the places for people to use them. The second part to that is the understanding that the account is just an account. It's not very meaningful to someone. What is meaningful is what you do with an account, or what you do with the loan. Right? There's a lot of discussion about the rates of loans. Who takes a loan just because they want to pay a debt every month? No, there's something you want to achieve. So for us, it's very important that we think about, and what we're trying to do is think about how a payment can then help people to achieve, or businesses, to achieve their goal. And as importantly, that the payment can then become what we call in English, we say an on-ramp, to greater participation in the formal financial system and to use of other services, so an upward spiral. And I have an example, but I want to stop in case you have questions, or maybe I'll give you the example. We do a lot, we partner very often with governments around the world, and delivering government payments and helping people pay governments. In the United States, I can pay my tax bill using my Visa card. Unfortunately, not my corporate card, but so one of the things that is now very well known is that the way a government pays people can be a real catalyst to building a digital financial system, right? Many governments pay in cash still. And so we've worked with governments to help change that. We're working with the government of Egypt, for example, to convert all of its wage payments from, literally they've been paying the government employees in cash. And so they want to make that a digital payment because there's so many benefits to the government. Efficiency, savings, more convenient for all the employees, better for money management, and cash management for the national treasury. But we also see that depending how you create that program, it has different outcomes. And so one of the big lessons is that if you have to have real thoughtfulness about how you design the program so that it has even bigger benefits for financial inclusion. And we did some research in China, our partners actually, Coffee being one of them, CFDFE is another, and a survey of about 3,000 households in poverty-stricken counties in northeast China. 3,000 surveys or people. Many, many people in that group opened their first bank account due to the government payment. But of those, 87%, excuse me, not 87 people, 87%, so nearly everyone who opened their first account because of the government payments takes everything out in cash the minute they get it. So there's a lot more opportunity there. And that's part of what my team does and part of what Visa is thinking about now. That was a long answer, but I hopefully gives you a sense.
Yeah, the second question, so as you mentioned, China is now building the cashless society. So people live in a city. We get used to use the phone to pay as Alipay, something like that. So how Visa see the opportunities in city of China?
So I think there's
So there are some difference. I mean, so maybe foreigner used to get paid by card, but Chinese not that as level.
Right.
So
well, as a foreigner in China, I have some challenges here.
Yes.
I am almost unbanked here in China because I can't use this because I don't have a Chinese bank account. I can't use the same systems. I think here it's not my role to talk about Visa in China overall, but let me talk about the financial inclusion opportunities and the needs in the cities and then also across China. And then also talk some about what Visa brings in terms of building the system. So China is amazing, right? You've got very, very high rates of overall access, and you are at the forefront together with, there's some other countries, Scandinavian countries are very far advanced as well. The United States were somewhere in the middle. But the consumer in Beijing or in Shanghai has, in English, what we say, a completely seamless experience, right? There's something you want to do, and you do that, and you don't think about the payment. It just happens. What we've seen in China is when you go into the rural areas, especially the low-income rural areas, and then even more the poverty-stricken counties, right? 681, I think, if I've got it right. That's not the same experience that those people are having. So I went now 2 years ago, up to in Bailan Yerchi in Inner Mongolia, and we went visiting a number of farms, and really active people. I remember one house, they invited me into the house and we had conversations, and they have a computer, and they said, yeah, but it's not connected to anything. It's not connected to the internet. Everyone, all their neighbors everyone came into the house. It was a lot of fun. Everyone took pictures, and I asked them, what are you using your phone for? They talk, they share pictures. There's none of that same experience that you have every day in Beijing. So helping to bring that out, there's a real question, why isn't that in the rural areas? What are the challenges? What are their needs? Well, it's different, right? How do you connect the existing services? How do you tailor products so that they're useful to the different people and the different businesses? And that's really understanding the needs. And I think Visa, touch wood, we could contribute quite a lot to that. And we can also do it in a way that people really trust. That's the other really, really important part is the trust and security, especially for low income. They don't have any money to lose. So.
Yes.
Yes. So, as you mentioned that you were very young when you were in China Dongbei province, right? And now you go back to these rural areas and to help them. So, from your experience, so for these years, what do you think are the Chinese microfinance get the most important developments, and in which areas do you think is most vulnerable for the time being?
So, I feel like one of my parents when I say, oh my gosh, everything's changed so much in my lifetime, right? But it's really amazing, the change, right? When I was first in Harbin, there were still two currencies, right? You're too young. My gosh, Jennifer, help me out. You looked at me like I was crazy.
She was not born.
Did you ever see, neither of you ever saw
Which
the,
year? Okay, I'm not going to ask about
not
this.
to be put in, but yes, I remember, right, there were two currencies,
Yes.
right, the foreigners, we were restricted to foreigners' currency. And it was really interesting because up in right, there were 5 of us, students, and we would be taken to the bank, and we had, I think we had, I can't remember if we had dollars or American Express traveler's checks, which is all something else you wouldn't understand, but maybe dollars, and change in the bank and get the foreigner's currency. But Harbin at that point, and this is Harbin city, we'd go to the market, and there were vendors in the marketplace who didn't know what the foreigner's currency was. Literally, I remember getting passed all the way down, and someone like three food makers down said, "Oh no, that's okay, you can accept it." Whereas in Beijing, right, they only wanted that was more valuable, right? And so we think about how much China has changed.
Yes.
Right. Do you have cash in your wallet at all?
Actually, some, but I haven't used for months.
Right.
Just in case, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's this incredible transformation, and with that transformation of the economy, but also right, poverty has changed. Right. I just so remember seeing the conditions in which the average person in Harbin and in the rural areas around Harbin lived, right? This is really amazing that I can visually and remember just the change. It's so impressive. And part of that then is also access to the financial system, right? It's what do financial services help you do? It's not the service itself. What is your goal? What is your outcome? And so there China has been just really, really fabulous progress. There's this really interesting tension when you take a step back now in China. You're absolutely at the forefront. But there's also now the single largest number of people without access to financial services are Chinese.
Yes.
At 200 plus million. Right, so this is this really interesting tension within China, and so we're really interested in how do you help solve that problem, and how do you do it in a way that helps also to advance the other goals, the poverty alleviation, the being part of a formal financial system. There's a big China, the rural areas are changing, right? And many other countries are having that same problem of what is the economic opportunity? Where do the youth want to be? How do you have sustainable livelihoods? So how do the financial services help that? And then how do you deliver them in a way that is scalable and sustainable? I think China's so far advanced, it's pretty easy to create a special project and put in a lot of money, but the question is scale and sustainability.
Yes.
And then also continuing to reinvest and redesign. And what we hear from our partners on the ground is that there's just a big difference between the cities and some of these poor rural areas and the attention. And that's where there's great opportunity for innovation and commitment
Yes.
and partnership.
Yes. So about innovation, because these days we talk about technology, and sometimes we have some myths about technology. We think technology can solve all kinds of questions and problems, but actually it's not. So how do you feel about the role of technology, maybe, in solving the Chinese problems?
I love that you asked that question. So people don't think of us this way. We are a technology company, but we're very much about what are you using the technology for? What is the problem you're trying to solve or the goal? And then also the caution to not over-engineer it. So sometimes people like to make things more complicated because it seems fancier, or it seems more cutting edge. But actually, if you go back and say, what's the need? What's the local custom? How do you do this? And then figure out the right application of technology. So one really, for me personally, really interesting question right now is around the elderly. In China, so the same survey that we did of 3,000 people, people older than 65 are dramatically less likely. They'll have a cell phone, but they really don't use it very much. And they're not comfortable, and they definitely don't use, actually, in the rural areas, the use of mobile financial services was very, very low, about 11% of the survey respondents, which is, compared to Beijing, which is, right? But elderly are uncomfortable. We've seen very similar challenges in Russia as well, with people who are older. And so there, the question is around two things. It's comfort with digital technology. You know, think about your grandparents, right? They're like, yeah, no, you figure out the television and how to make it all work,
Yeah.
right? And the VCR. But the second part is that often for elderly, there are other things in their culture and in their patterns that they want. So in Russia, people who are older want the human interaction. They want to go into a store to collect their pension because they want to have the coffee chat with other people. So there, the question is, okay, so how do you use the technology in a way that is really easy for someone who's older, whose eyesight is getting worse, whose hands are slower, right, all that. And then also think about, well, how do you couple technology, that side, with their other very specific contextual or demographic age needs. It's going to be different for women versus men. So for example, using post offices to deliver pensions. You can get it on your phone, but you could also go to the post office, the local branch every day. We've had there's been some really interesting research, again, going back to government payments, women in Islamic countries. And there was, I won't mention the country, but it was very specific research where women tend to be more confined to their homes. And limited, they can't go out. And the feedback was, wait, no, we want to go to the point of collection every week because that's our opportunity to see our friends and socialize. And they all go as a group, and that's okay in their culture. So they're like, no, don't send it to me on my phone. So it's a really interesting question of how do you apply technology for the and all goes back to understanding who it is you're trying to support.
Yes.
Long answer.
No, it's very good. Okay. So, technology is neutral. So, as you just mentioned, it could be used for good things, right? But actually, also could be used for bad things. So, from your experience, technology creates problems, and what kind of problems do you see are most serious? And how do you strike this balance, between innovation and risks?
Another excellent question.
Yeah.
We have entire divisions at Visa thinking about this.
Yes.
It's a really, really good question. We think about it a lot. Mostly because for Visa, trust is the most important thing. And security is part of trust. But what we as Visa bring is that brand name. So when something goes wrong, for example, it's very easy to resolve. There's a trust in the brand and services. So security and trust are at the front of everything we do. And one of our goals, and we're very successful and really, really pleased, is that a market vendor, right, a woman who sells fish in the market in Nigeria, she accepts a Visa card and uses it somewhere, which a number of them do through some partnerships we have. It's the exact same level of security that I have when I'm using it here in Beijing or in New York. There's no difference. It's all the same top tier, but it's getting much harder. So there are, if you'll permit me, maybe two big trends that we're following that we're really concerned about with technology and digital. The first is what we call hyperconnectivity, HYPER. So more than, it's like in overdrive. And it's exactly what we started with, that seamless experience. More and more people are connected in more ways to more devices, right? And there's going to be something crazy, like, I can't even remember, 70, I've got the word, wait, hold on, I can look this up. There's a crazy number, it's 70 million phones, help me out here.
Internet of Things, something like that? Or
No, it's 70% of the world.
Okay.
That's it, 70% will be connected by mobile by 2020.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that's more than 5 billion people. But the hyperconnectivity, right? You're demanding that convenience that you demand, right? You hail a taxi, you don't think about the payment, the bike, the groceries. It's not just that there are more and more devices that are connected digitally. There's more and more information on there, and there's more and more data, right? And that creates huge vulnerabilities. with that, the hyperconnectivity is that crime has changed. Criminals used to just want to get to your bank account so they could drain the bank account. Now the model of crime is to get all the information about you and to sell it, right? And thus all this other information, your personal information, which is now completely on the web, there's a lot of vulnerability around that. So we're really concerned with protecting that. That's one trend. So hyperconnectivity and the second is e-commerce, right? I have a great question for you.
Mm-hmm.
So cash is still really common. Do you think that around the world there are more payments in cash or more payments digital and by card?
Mm-hmm. I don't know, maybe more cash.
Digital payment.
So you're right.
Okay.
Actually, both right. In a sense, it only changed in 2015.
Ah, okay.
2015, digital payments just became more than cash, but there's still lots of cash. But e-commerce, right? And you have so much, right? Think of Alibaba here in China,
Mm-hmm.
right? That e-commerce is enormous. And that also is adding more into the vulnerabilities, right, and the transactions going on. So those are the two big trends that we really see in terms of the amount of data, the connectivity, the vulnerabilities. And criminals are getting so smart, right? So what we do, we think about two things, always leading with trust and security.
Mm-hmm.
We have a whole number of products and services, but we basically have a multi-layered approach that centers on four things. First, it's how do you protect the data better? Just good old security. And we have lots of things like tokenization, right? These are all
Mm-hmm.
back-end things that you're not aware of when you use a Visa card. If you use a Visa card, that when I use it, but even the chip, lots of things to keep that information safe. And the second, so it's protect the data. We devalue the data, right? So if criminals get in and can take a piece of information as it goes along, it's not of any use to them. So for example, there's something called tokenization. Instead of sending information about you when you request to pay for something, we send a one-time code that's now become an industry standard. And the code is just asking for verification. It comes back. So a criminal can intercept it, but it's of no use to them. So protect data, devalue data. We harness and analyze the data to identify and prevent fraud before it happens. So that's a lot of, it's big data, it's volumes, it's constant monitoring. And I think we're up to 100,000 transactions, 100 billion transactions per year. Every single one of those is monitored as they're happening. And then the last part, which is equally important, is empowering consumers to protect themselves. And this is everything from knowledge about what kind of, how do you safeguard your PIN, how do you treat things, even understanding what you're signing up for. But then also there's more bells and whistles of alerts and fraud alerts, and you can put limits on your cards and say only can be used in my hometown because I never travel,
Okay.
and all kinds of things like that. But it's a really big challenge, and helping consumers stay protected is really important to us.
Mm-hmm. That sounds very great. So maybe take turns.
Once you have mentioned that establishing a sound financial ecosystem is the focus of Visa's work. So can you specifically tell us what is included in it? And you also mentioned Visa can provide a variety of solutions for different countries. So how Visa can do this?
Yeah. But those are two questions, where to start. They're related. So the sound ecosystem, it goes back, I think earlier I mentioned, it's not just about creating, well, we say card, but we actually mean an account, because half of our cards are online or digital in phones. The ecosystem involves several things. It involves the product and service that you need, a debit card, a debit account, a payments account, but it also is a place to use it, right? And so our business model and the ecosystem, you have to have that in balance. Otherwise, you can run into really big challenges. You get lots of cards